We are 63 days away from the MLB trade deadline, and the market is already taking shape, and it might be a problem. Right now, one name is dominating early conversations, Tarik Skubal. If Detroit falls out of contention, he becomes the biggest rental arm on the market, but he's not cheap and he's not simple. Here's the issue. Too many teams are stuck in the middle. Boston is close to a wild card spot, but struggling. Baltimore, inconsistent, but still alive. Across the American League, there are way more maybe buyers than actual sellers, which creates a dangerous deadline dynamic. Lots of teams wanting to buy, not enough impact players available. So the real question is this: do we get a blockbuster deadline or a quiet one where everyone waits too long and prices never match reality? Major League Baseball season is starting to tilt into the midsummer pressure point where contenders separate from pretenders and front offices begin quietly laying the groundwork for July's trade deadline. We're still 63 days out from August 3rd, but around the league, the conversations are already heating up. And right now, this deadline is shaping up to be less about chaos and more about uncertainty.
Yeah, right now it's all circulating around Tarik Skubal and what the Detroit Tigers plan on doing with him. The biggest storyline forming so far is Tarik Skubal. At the start of the year, Detroit looked like a rising contender, but injuries, inconsistency, and a slide in the standings have shifted the conversation. Now, Skubal, who's eligible for free agency after this season, sits at the center of speculation. And what makes the situation even more complex is value. He's not just an ace, he's a short term rental with elite upside. And that means contenders won't be bidding prospects, or won't just be bidding prospects. They'll be paying salary too, roughly $11 million for the final stretch of the season. If Skubal is healthy and dominant when he returns, he instantly becomes the type of arm that can swing October. But if Detroit stays out of contention, the question becomes unavoidable. Do they hold him for a qualifying offer return or cash in a massive deadline haul?
Parity is creating this dealer's market problem across the American League specifically, and especially the middle is crowded. Teams like Boston and Baltimore aren't clearly buyers or sellers. They're stuck in that uncomfortable zone where they're close enough to justify staying aggressive, but inconsistent enough to justify selling. Boston, for example, has struggled offensively for weeks, yet is still within reach of a wild card spot. Baltimore has underperformed on the mound, but remains in striking distance. And that's the key issue league wide. There's too many teams that believe they still can get in. That means fewer true sellers, and that creates a classic deadline squeeze. Lots of buyers, not enough impact players available, and front offices are already warning this could be a thin market unless more teams collapse in the next month.
Yeah, and also you have aggressive general managers waiting to strike on these moves. Even in a cautious market, there are always a few teams willing to push buttons. Keep an eye on organizations like Philadelphia, Seattle, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and San Diego Padres, clubs with a history of aggressive midseason swings. We've seen this before: blockbuster bullpen moves, star rentals, and prospect heavy deals that reshape the playoff race overnight. And if this market stays thin, that aggression becomes even more valuable. The teams willing to overpay might be ones that separate themselves come October.
Could we see surprise sellers? One of the more fascinating questions is whether underperforming contenders decide to pivot early. Houston is the most intriguing example. A slow start has raised internal questions about whether a reset is possible, though ownership has historically resisted full teardown moves. But if teams like Houston ever decided to listen on core pieces, the market would explode instantly. And that's the hidden tension here. A few unexpected sellers could completely flip a market that currently feels shallow.
Yeah, and ownership will be deciding who actually buys or sells. At this point in the season, it's not just baseball ops, it's ownership philosophy. We've seen it before. One owner pushes to keep a star, another green lights a tear down, and the entire market shifts. Teams like Tampa Bay, San Diego, and Minnesota all sit in interesting positions. Some are contenders with flexibility, others have valuable veterans who could bring major returns if made available. And in Minnesota's case specifically, players like Joe Ryan and others could reshape the market if ownership, not necessarily the front office, decide to listen. This is where strategy meets economics and where deadlines truly are won and lost.
Yeah, 2027 labor cloud is quietly influencing
Mhm.
decisions too. There's a long-term factor creeping into front office planning the upcoming collective bargaining situation with uncertainty around the next CBA, some teams may start thinking more conservatively, protecting payroll flexibility in case of disruption or structural changes to the league's economic system. That kind of thinking doesn't always show up immediately, but it can absolutely impact deadline willingness. In short, though, some teams may choose caution now so they're not trapped later. I still think it will be a fun trade deadline as we approach it. Done with a couple of months. We start June this week. We'll see what the Padres do, and we'll keep you updated on what's going on in Major League Baseball.